Thank you, Jim. Thank you for that power-packed talk and for sharing applications of AI in marketing in areas as diverse as visual search and cancer research. AI is definitely transcending across functions and sectors and promises to make the experience more personal. In that, it seems like a seamless fit for marketing. As Dr. Deepak Jain always says to us, that the value of managers is to put a structure on an unstructured problem. And the AI canvas that you just shared, the approach actually seems to give a blueprint that brings in structure to implementing AI in marketing. With this, I would invite now our distinguished panel that we have here with us today that brings diverse experience in research and industry, from technology to application. We are joined here by Professor Larry Birnbaum, Professor Rajkumar Venkateshan, and Mr. Sundar Madakshara. Professor Larry Birnbaum is a faculty at Northwestern University, and he's the former department chair for the McCormick School in the area of computer science and engineering. He's also the program mentor for Geo Institute's AI and Data Science program. His research and teaching focuses on applied AI, natural language processing, intelligent information systems, social media, data analytics, machine learning with applications to media and journalism. He's also a co-founder of a company called Narrative Science. Professor Rajkumar Venkateshan teaches marketing technology products, marketing strategy, and marketing analytics at Darden School, University of Virginia in the USA. When Dr. Venkateshan's research focuses on analytics as it relates to marketing, return on investment, customer lifetime value, mobile marketing, and the global political economy. We welcome you both. Mr. Sundar Madakshara is the head of marketing at Adobe India. At Adobe, he leads a team of marketers across all businesses and routes to the market. He is responsible for building a multi-year strategy for building Adobe brand. He has held leadership roles with companies such as Hindustan Unilever, Wipro, Visa, SAP, and Infosys. He's considered a pioneer in data-driven operating models in B2B marketing in India. I welcome you all to the panel, and Jim, I hand it back over to you for the panel.
Well, thank you, Prerna. And this was the portion of the day I was most looking forward to, was the opportunity to talk with three esteemed experts here. Mr. Sundar, nice to see you. Dr. Raj, nice to see you. Dr. Larry, nice to see you as well. Prerna, before I jump in, could we just have a quick time check so that we stay on your schedule? How would you like us to split panel versus Q&A time moving forward?
Yeah, so if we can have about 30 minutes of panel and followed by 30 to 35 minutes of panel and 30 to 35 minutes of Q&A, that would be good.
Okay, sounds like a plan. Thank you, Prerna. Well, what I thought I would do is maybe ask each of the three of you to say hello, to say a few words, and maybe start by sharing. We'll start with you, Dr. Larry, if you don't mind. Start by sharing a little bit of kind of what's your work and your interest in the field of AI and machine learning, what's keeping you busy, what's your focus in this, and then we'll go to Dr. Raj and Mr. Sundar. So hello, Larry.
Jim, hi, thank you. And for all of you, wherever you are, I hope you and yours are safe in this very challenging time. So thank you for being here today. And for Jim, thanks for inviting me to be on the panel. Well, as Prerna said, I've recently stepped down as chair of computer science at Northwestern and had this fantastic opportunity to, which I'm privileged really, to join as an advisor to the Geo Institute's new AI and data science program. I hope my voice is sounding stronger now. Is this better? Good, thanks. Okay, so the main thrust of my work over these really several decades now has been in applied AI and natural language processing, as Prerna mentioned. And right now I'm focusing really on three areas of work. The first is storytelling from data, which is the work that gave rise to the company Narrative Science that you mentioned, and by the way, which Jim is an advisor to also, so thank you, Jim, for your work there. And the company's premise is really pretty simple. The idea is to make the world's data understandable to people through storytelling, to make all of the world's data really understandable to people through storytelling. And one of the great lessons of the data revolution of the last few years is there's really no point in analyzing and gathering all the data that we're gathering and analyzing if you can't make the results understandable to people in a way that they can take action on. And that's really what gave rise to visualization as such an important topic in computer science. But from our perspective, really, it's the narrative that comes from the data that are really important to convey to people so that they can really understand and take action based on what's in the data. And that's the premise of the company. So my work there has really been very exciting in terms of making data accessible to people. Two other areas that I'm working on right now are, first of all, conversational interaction with computers. So I'm very interested in the idea of natural language, not just the text analytics, but really in making machines able to communicate with people in a way that's really accessible and natural to everybody. And the data revolution certainly has made that possible through speech interfaces, but there's a lot to go in terms of making those speech interfaces something that's genuinely helping you carry out a task in some way. So a few years ago, we actually built one of the world's first interactive cookbooks, talking interactive cookbooks, which was a lot of fun to do. But more recently, I'm actually working with some students to try and build a talking interactive first aid manual. So that's really kind of the focus of that kind of work. So things to help people do important tasks in real time, where those tasks require the attention of their hands and their eyes, so that speech becomes the very natural interaction modality. And then finally, I've been doing a little bit more fundamental work with some colleagues on trying to extend the semantic capabilities of current statistical machine learning technology in natural language, which is incredibly powerful and robust, but as I think we're all aware, still has some limitations from the point of view of its capabilities compared to human beings. So those are the three areas that I've been working in over the last few years.
Wonderful. Thank you, Larry. And we'll come back to having you, I think, shall we say, augment, if not correct, some of my explanations here momentarily on how this works, given your expertise. Dr. Raj, nice to see you. Dr. Raj and I have been good colleagues for a long time, and I was pleased to represent a lot of his thinking in my keynote, so much credit to him there. But how are you today? You want to share a little bit about what you've been working on? Oh, I think we've got you on mute, Doctor.
There we go. You need to have at least one person who is muted, right, on Zoom when they speak. So that person is me today. Thank you, Jim. Thank you for including me in this webinar. And it's exciting to see as well the Geo Institute and the initiatives here and the new program that is coming. And a little bit about me. I teach, as was mentioned, marketing strategy and executive students on customer centricity and customer journey mapping and digital transformation. My research is on customer engagement and predicting and managing customer lifetime value. I started my PhD and research career building models to predict customer lifetime value and connecting how marketing can be managed to maximize lifetime value. And this was when we were looking at this old targeted marketing, direct marketing, one-on-one marketing world, and the old systems of Siebel and SAP were just starting. And that's when we were doing this, and it was interesting to see you say like how personalization is the new big thing now, and when maybe in 10 years from now we'll be talking about how this was so passé. So in terms of other things I do, I have, in addition to the book, which I enjoyed working with you on, which is forthcoming next spring, I have a book on marketing analytics that was basically taking my course in Darden and converting it into a case book on how to use analytics for real stories of real companies, connecting analytics with marketing strategy. In terms of research, I'm working on things around AI and company strategy on AI these days. So I'm working on one project which I'm really excited about with some colleagues in India, actually, on acquisition of AI firms pre and post GDPR. Is the market, how is the market valuing firms based on the fact that they're now going to use customer data to make their money, and with privacy regulations, how is the reaction of the market to that? Another project continuing the customer lifetime value theme is on networks of Salesforce. When you have teams of Salesforce talking to a same company, how does these internal networks actually affect customer acquisition and cross-selling products? And finally, I've built a simulation software on media attribution, which I'm excited that it's going to launch later this month, on how managers can actually try with like a fitness app, a simulation game, to see how they can manage media across multiple channels, which is one of the main challenges in terms of combinatorial. There's so many combinations that can be done. Outside of work, these days, as we all are trying to figure out things to do when we are at lockdown and at home, I like kayaking, I'm working on my running, and I've been taking a lot of pasta classes, and proud to say I know like at least 3 different pastas that I can make now, and having a lot of fun with my family doing that.
Wow, wonderful. Well, we look forward to when you can invite us all over to your house to enjoy your pasta. Wonderful. Mr. Sundar, nice to see you. Tell us a little bit, please, about yourself and your role and some of the exciting things in this area that Adobe is doing.
Yes, thank you, Professor Jim. I think, when Geo University decided to call a panel of people who could speak on this topic, I thought they wanted to have experts, but they also wanted to have a student of artificial intelligence in marketing. And that's the role I'm here to play. I head marketing for Adobe in India, arguably one of the most interesting companies in the most interesting geography in the world when it comes to adoption of new technologies. So I think my current time is at Adobe. The last 3 years has been looking at the way our customers have been adopting new technology and how they're thinking in such non-linear terms into not just becoming best in India or best in Asia, but becoming world-class organizations by looking at adoption of technology, artificial intelligence in a whole new way than what I myself had thought that they would. So every day is an interesting story for me. I get to meet one CMO at least every single day, and just hearing his ambition and the future landscape that he has laid out for his company, and the importance of marketing on that strategy table, and to be able to infuse technologies such as AI and turbocharge that marketing engine is fantastic. There's never a dull moment in my role, and every day is a learning opportunity. I take some time to share this, of course, with my colleagues, but more importantly, I spend a lot of time teaching at several institutions on the topic of this, on this topic. I think we spend a lot of time on looking at data in the story, but I think I'm very, very puzzled about how do you look at the story in the data that you can do and run effective campaigns from the data that you emerge. So I've got some interesting anecdotes to share as we go along. Thank you, Jim.
Wonderful, thank you. I'll go to Dr. Raj and then Dr. Larry. Dr. Raj, I think it's a natural question some folks might have at this point of some of these terms, cluster analysis, k-means, regression analysis. We've known these, we've done these for years and years and years, even predictive analytics. What's really new or different here? Isn't this the same as what we've always been doing? I run regression analysis in my business and my brand. How is this different? Oh, mute, Raj.
Thank you, Jim. This is a very important question, definitely. And the way, I mean, this has been something I have thought about as well a lot in terms of what is really different. And because, I mean, marketing has always been about big data, When we started with IRI or AC Nielsen in the 80s, we had tons of data about customer purchases, and we've used statistics to analyze all this data. So what is new really going on here? And so one of the things I then found out is there has been a real shift in how AI has approached itself. And I think that is where these worlds have merged. So before, when I was in undergrad in computer science, we learned about expert systems and neural networks. And Larry knows a lot more about this. I was a student, he was the teacher. But, it was about expert systems. It was rules. And machine learning and statistics was about analyzing data. These two things intersected when AI became data driven. So what does that mean? So before, when the expert systems were, when you said a dog had a brown, if you had to describe a dog, the computer, you would write a rule in it saying it's a round brown circle with 3 black circles within them for the 2 eyes and the nose. But then that could be the same thing for a muffin as well. So now you can easily see how these things get confusing for a computer, and how many rules do you start writing? Do you start writing about whiskers? You can see muffins also that have some whiskers around their eyes, right? So what happens then? So the real breakthrough happened when AI then went from expert systems to data-driven, right? And that's when this whole field started merging. And the basic principle is you feed a lot of images of muffins and dogs to the machine that are pre-classified by humans. And then the machine learns to predict these classifications, form its own rules, create all these nuances just like a baby would do, and then try to figure out the human process as much as possible. And this was the strategy used by Fei-Fei Li at University of Illinois for image recognition, which eventually morphed into Google Images. Larry will speak a lot more about that as well. So AI is, like you mentioned in your slides, the bigger bucket. And then we have ML, which is where we try to gain understanding about customer insights. And then within that, you have neural networks, which is deep learning. So the really new things has been the use of AI to do neural networks and machine learning and image recognition and the chatbots that Larry was mentioning that he built for cooking, right? And within marketing, this makes a big difference because now you're talking to machines rather than typing. And so it's becoming more and more like futuristic, and the brands have to then project themselves as talking back to the consumers, and that creates a whole new world. And this is where I feel there is the power that AI uses to personalize like acquisition, retention, growth, and advocacy.
Great. So Dr. Larry, please jump in here. You've worked with many entrepreneurs, companies, brands, businesses, marketers. What are some of the things that you see them doing as a best practice when they start to think about how to apply AI versus what are some of the common pitfalls that you advise against and that you see brands making?
Yeah, thanks, Jim. I think, when I advise organizations, sort of corporate organizations, about how to think about AI, I always start by asking them to think about prototyping something themselves, not because they're necessarily going to build it themselves. They might not really have the complete competence in-house to do that, or even want to acquire that competence initially. You talked about those stages that organizations go through, but it's a great learning to actually try and build something yourself using some relatively simple components off the shelf or open source, because you learn about the problem, and then also, frankly, you learn about how to talk to vendors and evaluate them and whether they actually understand your problem the way you do. And I think that's kind of a critical part. So I think it's very important to invest a little bit of effort in prototyping stuff in-house, just to develop enough savvy to be able to sort of really have a good interaction with potential vendors or consultants when you're trying to build things with them. And I think that's a big key. You might not build it yourself, but you'll understand the problem a lot better.
Yeah, and I think implicit in your comment, if you want to agree or disagree with me here, is you also, I think, need to know what problem am I trying to solve, right? Like what variable am I trying to predict? I use the example of good customers and likely to leave customers. What am I trying to predict? And if I could predict that better, would it have a meaningful impact on my business?
Absolutely. I think you need to and in fact, kind of in the style of iteration or agile, I think building the prototype again is a way to actually come to understand your problem a lot better and understand what's doable a lot better. I think another place to be cautious or ambitious, both, is that the line between what's doable and not doable is a little mysterious right now, and it's moving all the time. And so kind of to make sure you're on the frontier, you're sometimes going to overshoot a little bit. So it's, I think, important to be ambitious, but to make sure you understand quickly whether something is really going to be doable in the time frame and with the resources you have in mind, or whether maybe it's a better thing to try and pick the doable problem and work on that instead. I think that's always a big challenge. It's a big challenge in research too, by the way. I mean, if you're going to do a project, you'd like to get it done in 3 years, not 30. So.
Right. Yeah. Sundar, why don't you chime in here? Tell us a little bit, you alluded to earlier about some of the brands that Adobe that you work with, some of the CMOs that you've been talking to. What are you hearing? How are they approaching it? How are they getting started? Or what are some of their challenges and advice you give them?
Sure. So Jim, I'd like to summarize it with 4 points and 2 quick examples. I think, we've always known the 4 P's of marketing that Professor Philip Kotler gave us many decades ago, and they still hold good. A lot of these frameworks are very, very useful, but in the new world, I think they have to be reinterpreted in slightly different ways. One, I think 4 P's of modern marketing, the topic that you alluded to, I think number 1 is powered by data. I think data runs your business. You need to know that. The data that you have in all forms needs to get integrated, and you need to be able to make decisions based on that. So that's the first P. The second one, I think, again, which a lot of people alluded to, is personalization. The dream of every marketer is to market one-on-one, irrespective of which business you deal with. Everybody wants to look at giving messages which are extremely personalized at that point in time, which is relevant to that particular customer. So that's the second P. The third one, I think, in this world, we live in a phygital world. Even in the COVID world, it is phygital. There is a physical part of it, and there is a digital part of it. So you need to be able to understand data and marry data across both these channels. And this is probably the most common challenge that many businesses face when they have data coming from very disparate sources, and they still have to merge it and make a sense and come up with a strategy that works for them. So that's the third P, which is phygital. And the last one I would say is putting everything on a platform. It's very important to put everything on a digital platform, which helps you organize this data, be able to analyze it, and be able to predict using artificial intelligence, paradigms. Adobe, of course, has been at the forefront of this, but let me share with you some very interesting case studies that we have done with some of our customers. It's first of all is on content creation. Adobe's products can help you actually predict the way you design and create content. So by which what I mean, if you have a photograph and you're a photographer and you take pictures and edit in a certain way, Photoshop can actually sense the way you edit typically and go ahead and actually give you those options well ahead of your, even before you get to that. The second way we do that is also by looking at what kind of content is required for which particular purpose. So if you're using a print media, how should it look? If it's a digital media, so it repurposes, the content itself repurposes for the medium that you're using. So that's the first use case that I'd like to count. The other one is about travel companies. I heard an interesting concept. Somebody was sharing with me that there is a concept of revenge travel that's going to come up, like revenge shopping, where people have been clustered in for too long. They've missed an entire summer vacation in India and in other parts of the world as well. So what are people going to do? That the people going to be coming out as soon as the situation gets even marginally better. Travel safe again, but do it in whole different ways. Now, this is where the challenge for the marketer is. He's got a lot of data, which is old, which is pre-COVID, but post-COVID, how much of that data and the paradigm can be used is really the call of artificial intelligence. Because really, if you look at what's going to happen is not all the data is useless. There are a lot of aspects that can still get reused. And the more data that you have, the better you will be at predicting how it's going to come in. So don't ignore the data, which some people probably are making the mistake of doing that. The other one, last one that I like to give an example is that of an insurance company, which is using artificial intelligence to predict the risk propensity of its people who are buying insurance. So they have a beautiful way of integrating data coming from so many different sources, including the time at which somebody actually charges his phone uh, when it's dying. So if somebody is totally averse to charging, totally averse to risk, he's going to charge it the moment it touches 50%. We're looking at data coming from very, very interesting sources to come up with a risk profile of customers. These are some of the the interesting case studies that we've used. But I think the one which really tops it all is in an automotive industry, they're using psychographics to position a car as a technology car, as a technical car, the internet car in a rather crowded Indian automobile market. And they've just taken the market by storm by just reaching out to those people with a certain psychographic. Now, all of us know that how difficult that is. It's easier to hit people with a certain demographic profile, but psychographic adds a whole different complexity into it, and they've done it. So this is what I'm busy, Jim, doing nowadays, and hopefully in the next few years we'll have more interesting case coming.
Wonderful. Thank you for those great case studies and that reinterpretation or redefinition of the 4 Ps. That was wonderful. Dr. Raj, we should probably talk in the minutes that we have left a little bit about team structure, culture, organization. There probably are some marketers listening to us here today saying, oh my gosh, do I have the right people? Do I need to retrain? Do I have to go hire an army of data scientists? Do I need agile process, as Larry referred to? So Raj, maybe talk a little bit about your advice to folks listening here from the marketing organization standpoint.
Yes, so this is certainly a big challenge. And I think this is something that is a lot of marketers are struggling with, people who we talk to. And the brands that have been successful are the ones who have been able to take the whole company towards this purpose. And some of the things that are, there are some things that are encouraging and things definitely that are challenging that companies need to address, right? So the encouraging thing is this is doable. This is, companies have done it, and you can start today. And you don't need like a big database or a big system in place before you can start, right? And almost everybody has Google Analytics or Adobe Analytics, and you can use the data like you mentioned in the first stage, which we talk about is with the data integration. Is the first is to get first-party customer data, right? To look for places in your company where you are having a direct interaction with customers. And what kind of information can you get about your customer responses as well as your firm actions? And having that data, working with vendors to start with some small experiment to see if I can, in a certain segment, customize, say, the promotions that I give for my product to like to one particular segment or so forth. And so that, or even can I advertise with a particular message like Chase did to some segments of customers, right? So you start with a small thing there and learn and move on from, and learn and develop from there. I think you don't need a grand vision. You don't need like $20, $30 million upfront to start doing this. You work with what you have and build and show the proof is in the pudding and then move from there. I think that attitude, I think, is necessary. And of course, these days you have a lot of, there's a commoditization happening. There's good work done by companies like Adobe with their platforms on analytics that, you know, you can start tapping into. So even if you don't have an in-house team, you can start with these cloud-based services, learn from it, and then go and build your own team.
Absolutely. Level one, level two, right? For sure. So before we transition to audience question and answers, and Prerna is going to rejoin us momentarily, I'd like to go Dr. Larry, then Sundar, and last word back to Dr. Raj with some thoughts. Larry, first of all, anything else that we didn't get a chance to address that you'd like to share with the audience, but then also maybe just a piece of advice from each of the three of you of something in this space that you would recommend folks start doing, stop doing, or continue doing. So microphone is yours, Larry.
Thank you. First, I think the point Sundar made about the phase change we've gone through and how that affects statistical machine learning models that were built using data from 6 months ago, even, or 3 months ago, I think is a really critical one. And by the way, this is a really, I think, important area for continued exploration and pushing the technology to make it sort of amenable to kind of control via sort of knobs and things that would let you actually tune it quickly to new situations or understand what parts of it are applicable to new situations. I think that's going to be a big challenge in the technology going forward, and one that I think will be very exciting and I think will develop pretty quickly. So that was a really an important point, and I don't think we should let it go by. It's really a key. I think there are two things that come to my mind. One is the issue of where small businesses will actually get the data, which I think is really a really interesting challenge, especially in the context of a nation like India, where there's small farms and small businesses, and how to make this technology accessible to them and usable and useful by and for them, I think is really a critical challenge. I thought the Unilever example in Thailand was very informative, but that was a big campaign in and of itself. So I think the question of how small organizations can acquire the data they need to build models, I think is really a very critical one, and one that's going to bear some thought and a lot of effort. I mean, one of the good things about certainly getting beyond transaction data is going to be interesting, because they're not going to have that transaction data. So making sure that they have access to social media data, for example, to make those predictions is going to be really very critical. Finally, I'd like to say something about personalization. I was struck by a quote in your talk also from Carl Worth about helping organizations decide what would be a good experience for you. I'm a big believer that the future is going to be sort of collaborative human and artificial intelligence, people and machines working together. And so I think a future that I'm excited by is one where we work together with the machines to decide the experience that's right for us. And that helps make the experience all the better, because it's maybe a piece of self-exploration or self-understanding as well. I think there are a lot of situations where people don't even understand the possibilities that are in front of them, or the things that they might want to do or might be able to do. And I think some model of joint exploration of these possibilities, I think, is almost the highest expression of what marketing is to help us kind of understand the world and understand how we can relate to the offerings that the world has to sort of understand who we are better and develop ourselves better. So I think that's really a big part of the future I'm excited about.
Yeah, well said. Thank you. Dr. Raj, and then Sundar, last word.
Yeah, so in terms of how to think about it, what's in my mind is that the pandemic and what is happening here, and what Sundar talked about with the data being different now, right? Because the system before was different than the system going forward. Now we can think about it, oh yeah, the data has changed, and what do we do? Or it's also an opportunity. I think the opportunity comes in the way of the fact that all the consumers are online. The companies have enough support within the companies to be digital, or at least have some aspect of digital, which means your ability to collect first party data just got way better than what it used to be. So as an opportunity for companies, your internal employees and customers want to be online, and you're collecting data. The second thing, which I think is for someone who is thinking about how do we do this, where do we begin, are we already behind? Think about this. Everybody has hit pause and are restarting. So if you are a company who is just starting, guess what? The world gave you the best reset machine. you are now restarting with everyone else, and you have time to catch up. And when we reopen, the things are different. Consumers are going to be different. The way our perspective is going to be different. So we all have to relearn our models, relearn the way we do things. So we can think of it also as an opportunity that if you haven't started yet, this is the time. You have the best time to learn and grow with everyone else.
Yeah, everyone's at the starting line now. Yeah. Great. Well said. Sundar, please.
Yeah, thank you. I think I just like to make a couple of points. One, I think, is that before anyone embarks on on his journey for artificial intelligence, he's got to build a picture of success for the company. He's going to tell it. He has to predict, and he has to be able to tell the company, look, this is what success looks in 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, and beyond, right? If you don't do that, you'll be running into some very sort of very unrealistic expectations. I think which is what happens in many of these implementations and in many of these adoptions. So I think clearly putting together a roadmap and committing to certain very measurable metrics that they will measure not now, but 30 days from now, 60 days from now, 90 days from now. And if nothing is going to happen in 90 days, I think you should be clear too. But look, 90 days, nothing is going to happen. And then we will start to see the results. Never overcome it on that timeline. Second thing I think we should not be, and I hate saying it in a negative way, is never undermine the cultural change that a company has to undergo when it is adopting. It's not just a nice tool that you get in and then everything suddenly magically changes. It impacts the job, it impacts the perspective of everybody in the supply chain. So I think when you're doing this, I think one useful tool to use, one useful framework is a simple question called why. Why are we doing this? So that takes the fad out of it, because you say, no, we're not doing it because everybody else is doing it. We're doing this because it makes a certain business sense. And I think I completely agree with Professor Venkatesan when he says, this is the time to accelerate. And I was so surprised initially, but not anymore, that when COVID hit, many companies which were very, very severely hit on day one, not on day two, but on day one, have used this opportunity to accelerate and say, look, where we have landed because we did not have a digital mindset. Now we are not going to pay the price, continue to pay the price 12 months from now, 18 months from now. So if there were any obstacles, they get removed automatically. So these were the three thoughts that I leave you with.
Wonderful. Well, thanks to all three of you. Appreciated that panel discussion. And I would like to now transition and invite our host and moderator, Prerna, to rejoin us. And she will MC a question and answer period for our panelists to answer some audience questions. Hello, Prerna.
Sure. Thank you so much. And this is a very insightful and intriguing discussion from impact of COVID to sort of really resetting the graph, and how AI will learn in this new paradigm is something that we all need to think and grapple with. So with that, I would start with a few questions that have come in. One of the questions that I think many people have asked is how do you think implementing AI and ML in business strategy in Indian scenario will be done, especially in a land which has many languages? How do you think we can localize the AI in marketing here? So over to you, Jim.
Sundar, you want to start there? Raj, I know you might have some thoughts here as well.
So I don't think we should talk about AI as something which is going to happen 10 years from now. As we speak, we are at least 7 years into implementation of artificial intelligence systems in India in marketing. It's not just in India, everywhere in the world. So let's not talk about it like some new planet has been discovered. It's well on its way. The implementation already got done. Coming to India, I think the challenge is no different than implementing any other digital transformation project. So it just doesn't matter. There are systems which can read prominent English Indian languages. There are systems which can read prominent languages. Up to 225 dialects can be read, and artificial intelligence can very well be implemented as we speak. There are many companies which are already doing it. So it's no different, and there's no specific challenge as far as India is concerned. Actually, it's in many ways the Indian the population has taken a, like a leapfrog. We're very good at taking leapfrog. So we've taken one more leapfrog by using a lot of, we access the internet through mobile data, right? And so a lot of data, a lot of information is already available in the local languages, 12 prominent Indian languages that I'm aware of. AI parameters work very well on them. So it's work in progress as we speak.
So I can add to, I think I would to this by thinking about it, not about the language. AI, certainly natural language processing is a big part of AI, and that's true, but marketing is beyond promotions. So if you think about, I think some of the things I hear when I talk to venture capitalists in India is where the activity is around distribution and the AI in terms of operations of actually logistics, and which is the backbone of all digital transformation. And how do you actually manage the distribution networks and the routes and the people that carry the products around? I think there is a lot of AI going on there. And the other place where you see a lot of activity is also around payments and finance, consumer finance. And I think so even in those things, I don't think, so if you think about things that are really for India and for things that are really Indian specific AI, these are really big places where a lot of activity is happening. In addition to what Sundar was talking about in terms of the languages and the differences we have across regions.
Sure, thank you. So my next question is that, this is from Dr. Bijal Mehta, who's an associate professor at Ahmedabad University. She asks, with all the buzz about AI, where does that leave the human touch and orientation, particularly in the service-related businesses?
Yeah, I think, Dr. Larry, you were alluding to the combination of human plus machine.
Yeah, I think that's really important, and I think that's where the future lies. I think one of the interesting things about the Turing test even is if you can't distinguish the human's answers from the machine's answers, that's the definition of the machine being intelligent. Of course, what if you could distinguish them, but sometimes the machine's answers were better, and that's actually the case right now. In other words, machine intelligence and human intelligence are overlapping, but they're not identical, and they're not going to be identical. So I think there's really, the model going forward has to be how to build on the strengths of both of these things to really make the world better, and how to help, in this instance, help customers find what they need and what will help them move themselves forward. So I think that's really quite critical. Yeah.
Yeah, and I might just chime in here and add this what we've talked about today, applying big data, machine learning, does not eliminate or reduce. I would argue it actually increases your requirement or expectation as a marketer to have first-person consumer research, ethnographies, go talk to people, go walk through stores, go interview them, go in their homes, etc. I recently wrote an article with one of the other Kellogg professors on a couple of techniques to do this. It seems like, unfortunately, more and more marketers that we talk to now try to sit in their office and run their business off a spreadsheet or machines. Yes, great, use those things, but you still have to go talk to people and then bring that into your plan. Would you agree, Larry?
Absolutely. I mean, it's just, yes. I mean, first, because the systems aren't complete yet, but second, because, again, what the machine is good at and what we're good at overlap but aren't the same. I mean, they have to be enough the same that we can communicate with each other, but they don't have to be identical, and they won't be.
Prerna, next question.
Yes, sorry. Sorry about that. Just give me a moment. Yeah, so this question is for Mr. Sundar. So what are psychographics? Can anyone learn and implement it in business? And so the person who's Elvison D'Souza, he's a founder of Power Inc. He says that I feel that data analytics could mislead the result of what consumers want and what is actually needed. So they might be basic necessities which are necessary to consumers. So how would you address that?
So I think we should not make artificial intelligence the enemy of natural intelligence, right? I think you should know that's where the organizational intelligence actually lies, in understanding which technology you want to use for what. Now, you can do so much with AI, right? And ensure that a lot of insights actually come to you about a particular customer. But what you do with that customer is entirely up to you as a person who's running that organization, right? So psychographics is basically segmenting the market on the basis of how people think, and not so much on the basis of demographics, which is their age and education and other details about um, that are rather more easy to find out. But psychographics helps you to segment the market in many ways. For example, people who are conservative in their risk-taking ability, people who are adventurous, and so on. So it's a field by itself that you'd use. But unfortunately, no data will ever throw it up. That is the real application of AI, if you ask me, because it's actually looking at a whole lot of data, which is, and not just giving you the mathematical average and the standard deviation, but goes much beyond that, and actually tells you what is the person thinking at that point in time. So when you go to an e-commerce site and you look for a perfume, right? There's something that there are a bunch of products it suggests along with that perfume. How did they know that? Because it's not just demographics; it's also psychographics, which at the back end is getting worked on because of a artificial intelligence engine which is actually running. So it's interesting, but you'll have to apply your mind and do the mapping right to do that. But if you do that, I think ultimately, please remember, we all have to remember that we are selling to human beings, and we should never lose sight of that.
Certainly, the two work together. The next question is, can AI help in marketing if the rest of the organization is not run on AI-powered tools and big data strategies? So how much can they expect in terms of ROI? Can small and medium companies also afford the same? Jim, I would point that to you.
Yeah, maybe Raj, you want to start on that one? I know you've got some thoughts on department by department.
Yes, so certainly. So if we look at the broad picture, if you look at who's consuming data the most in organizations now, it is marketing by a big shot, right? So marketers are using a lot of data about consumers to make their tactics and plans. Now, so you do need a whole organization behind for marketing to be actually successful. Right? So, there's a company in the US called CarMax. It's a retailer for used cars, right? And it's $1 billion company, very successful, but they do a lot of AI in marketing. But for them to be successful, they had to have the systems in place first, right? So they had to work with they changed the CIO. Then there was a shift in the operations because this is a retail store. Whatever message they send the consumers, the retail store also needs to implement that, and there has to be a connection between those two. So that is certainly the ideal, and they take them a long time to do that, but you need connections across all these, like the CIO, CFO, COO, CMO, to do all of these things. That's the ideal. But can you do it? Not every organization can get that, and that kind of support and that kind of transformation. So if you're in marketing, what do? right? That's where you go with like things in our first stage, where we look at like just like, you know, the vendors that you have, Google Analytics, Adobe Analytics, things that you have on your website, if you have a website. Let's start there and start like personalizing some messages or emails that you send your customers about like based on what they behaved and what they did, right? So what they did on the website, if the email is customized to that, it goes a long way than a blast email about, hey, here are the 10 products that I sell, versus if somebody is looking at just like shoes, here is the shoe that you would like, right? Just that can become a personalization that you can start with and see the response and move from there.
Yeah, Larry, maybe jump in here. How do you think or advise companies? You said earlier, and we've all said, like, just get started, try some things, do some prototyping, experiment. But yet, pretty quickly, everybody's going to say, wait a minute, if every division, every department, every function just started experimenting, we'd have some chaos, and then at some point, a massive integration project. So how do you balance or square those two things?
Wow. Well, certainly, I think I do believe in starting small, and I think that you can do some things with small data and simple techniques like nearest neighbor or just simple statistical packages. And I think I agree that people should get started doing that. You raised a really fascinating question, because I apologize for this. I was thinking about the Coke machine example that you had also, which is like, it's so great because it's not just personalized marketing, it's personalized product development. You know, it's really you're moving way back into the chain of events that leads to somebody consuming something, and I think that's going to be it's a much bigger bridge. I mean, we have to think about flexible manufacturing, and certainly for products. Services are a little bit different, I think, but I think some companies will be able to do that, and I'm not sure that all have the capability to actually put that flexibility in. Although things like 3D printing, I think, are going to make that more feasible, even for sort of physical products. I apologize for giving that kind of a vague answer. I think you just picked one of the biggest challenges.
Yeah, Sundar, how do you advise companies, right? Because I mean, at a certain point, you could imagine a CIO or CEO or board saying, "Hey, freeze! Nobody does anything until we have a grand plan." But that could take years, and you mentioned some of these kind of challenges of big implementations. So how do you think about this?
Yeah, there is one company in which the CMO, the CIO, the CTO, the whole board, and the whole CEO, and everybody, CFO, are all aligned perfectly on artificial intelligence. There's such a company, and that company exists in utopia. Um, I don't think there's any company in the world where everybody's aligned. It's not that people don't have the right intentions. It's, as organizations, we run under a lot of constraints, and there's always prioritization. So just like artificial intelligence is a priority for marketers, something else is a top priority for someone else. Supply chain optimization is equally important. So we can, and the board has only so much of finite resources that they can look at, and they have to prioritize. But this is a good problem to have, Jim, if you ask, because if your marketer is someone who is ambitious and who's adventurous, I think you have the right person in that place. God forbid if the marketer is not willing to make those experiments, and you have the reverse problem where everybody in the company wants to try out things, and your marketer, your CMO is the biggest constraint, then bad luck to you. I want the CMO to be an extremely ambitious, adventurous person. He's licensed to do that. Now, how does he do it? I think exactly to what Larry was saying, that he pinches a bit of budget, hides it somewhere, and runs these small experiments to prove to himself and have that conviction to go and present to the board that, look, this is what we did, and this is what we got, and this is what we need to invest to get this way. People want to see that, and I don't think that's going to be a constraint.
Yes, no, exactly. And that's what Raj and I tried to characterize then as that sort of level 4 stage where you've done your experiments, you've got some proof of concept, you have some before and after, old way, new way data. Then you can go to the board and say, like, look, now build or buy, let's go. So, yeah, great. Prerna?
Yeah, so next question. The person says that, say I'm a poor farmer growing vegetables and I'm selling it in a local farmer's market. So all this AI and AI application is largely, you know, it requires a lot of R&D and a lot of investment and application. So how do you see that I can benefit in terms of productivity and in terms of efficiency and at the same time, will I be able to afford it?
Well, maybe I'll start and then panelists jump in here. I've told this story before. We have some friends who own a small, one location, little local restaurant, 10 tables or so. So not quite the local farmer, but a small family business. Certainly no CIO, no technology budget, this kind of thing. But what they wanted to do and, you know, is predict or optimize how to maximize both diner satisfaction and maximum check, right? Like the amount of the ticket for every diner who comes. And part of that is convincing people to order dessert, right? Like an add-on. And so what they said is, how can we predict which customers are most likely and which desserts are most likely to be accepted? And if they could do that, they knew that that was a higher revenue and higher gross and net margin. And so what they did was they simply started with a little pencil and paper survey when they would bring the check to everyone with 3 or 4 questions. And then they hand entered that into an Excel database. And now, Larry, you can chime in here with your thoughts on this, but they used one of the many emerging, I guess, data science as service cloud platforms. It was Intersect Labs in this case, where they could then upload that file, determine what's the dependent and independent variables, and get a prediction back in real time. And then they use that to then tell their servers when the customers came in, these are the customers who you should really push dessert to, and this is what you should recommend. And they found a higher revenue and profitability out of that. So I don't know, Larry, what's your feeling on some of these cloud-based data science as service predictive engines?
Use them, absolutely. And I think that I love that. The only thing that would make that example better would be to go to sort of A/B testing instead of surveys, or something a little bit more natural in the service. But yeah, absolutely. I think there's good ways to get started using the existing platforms and services that are out there, especially if they're relatively inexpensive. I do want to speak to the issue of agriculture specifically, though, since that was brought up. I hope this is something that the Geo Institute will be able to actually address in the coming years. I think this is really AI for agriculture is going to be a really critical area for the whole world. But if you look in the United States, where agriculture has become industrialized, it's going to develop in a different way, because it's going to develop for the massive industrial organizations that farms in the United States have become. It's not going to work in the context of India or much of the rest of the world, where there are small farmers who really form the backbone of the food production in those countries. And I think that building products and services that they can use that are affordable by them is really going to be an important challenge going forward, and one that I hope India can take the lead in making happen.
Sorry, just to add here, just to what Larry said, that AI for social sector and social space in India is really big, and companies including like Geo, like ourselves here, are investing in AI platform for agriculture, education, healthcare as well. So I think some of that investment in this space will also be really helpful. Thank you for pointing that out, Larry. My next question is, how do you think AI and machine learning can be implemented in B2B strategy for B2B client acquisition? Um, so to keep in mind and to bring in the aspects of India here, which is a very, very cost conscious market. So how do you address again the issues of affordability in this space?
Yeah, Raj, and then maybe Sundar on B2B.
So I think B2B is an interesting space for AI, and where, in fact, contrary to popular opinion, a lot of activity is actually happening there, right? And I'll come to the Indian context in a minute, but there are at least 3 examples I can see in B2B where companies have used it, right? There's a company called TE Connectivity in the US, and they do this electric switches. And there was a traditional industrial boots on the ground kind of company. And turns out their customers over time became companies like Facebook and Google, and the buyers there are already searching about the company before they're like the salespeople show up online. The buyers in Facebook know more about the company's products than probably the salesperson does. And they had to go through this whole journey of digital transformation, digitalization, and understanding the digital customer journey and enabling the salesperson with digital. The other example is another industrial company called Industrial Scientific. They have industrial in the name too, right? And they do these sensors for within microphones that people use in oil rigs. And these are really important because this is a safety issue for people working in these hazardous conditions. What they did was use those IoT sensors to build a dashboard for understanding people's movements using those sensors and for enabling their clients to improve worker safety using the IoT data. And that was an additional service that they provided in addition to the sensors. And speaking on sensors, you see, and this is where some of the India context comes in. Safety is important everywhere, so IoT and that is certainly important. The other I've seen like companies like Siemens, when we have run programs for them, one of the main things they do is they have these sensors in all their machines. What this allows them is to see the wear and tear of the machines and do preventive maintenance. So it's not only, okay, Siemens is selling their own products so that they don't go to a third-party service parts provider, but the company has less downtime and is saving a lot more costs. So in that sense also, within the Indian context, when you're cost conscious, leveraging some of this IoT and talking to your consumers about how your customers, your industrial customers, about how some of these technologies can actually help them save money in the long term could be actually a valuable value proposition.
Yeah, so just chiming on that, completely agree with Professor Venkateshan. I think that B2B has seen some of the most interesting implementations because I think the value that you get out of it, the ROI is significantly higher for very, very comparable, investment that you make in AI. I think the chief, the main purpose of using AI in the whole sales and marketing process is actually the disintermediation of sales. Like what Professor Venkateshan just alluded to, that more than 80% of B2B customers actually have not only found enough about your product, but also have made up their mind probably in the way they want to buy. It's very evident to us even before a salesperson actually meets people, they have a very good framework available on how they want to compare and contrast. So this is your moment. Find out who are the people who are looking for you, get that message clearly across to them in the most relevant and authentic manner. That is the job of, that's really the purpose of AI in B2B marketing. The usage of DDOM, which is the data-driven operating model in marketing, is one of the earliest use cases, if I may say, which has been used. We have been using it for a couple of years now very successfully to predict and set a very strong working rhythm in terms of precisely the question which is on customer acquisition. And it has worked out very well. B2B space is finite. That's the good news. Where you always know who your customers are, so it's easy to track what is the message, what did resonate, what did not resonate, who are the passive people and why are they passive, how do I get them activated, and so on. It can be very, very interesting. It's not as dull as people make it out to be. B2B, some of these implementations can be very, very interesting. I heard about a steel company which actually has done a very, very interesting way of segmentation of their market to roll out a very sophisticated customer value management process using artificial intelligence in India with very limited data. Again, it doesn't mean that you can get started only after you have gigabytes of data available. With very limited data that was largely internal, they have been building models which help them predict. And you can go out as far as you can with your imagination about how you use the data. If you're waiting for that perfect moment, as I said, it will definitely happen in utopia very, very soon.
Thank you, Sundar. So the next question that I have hits really close to the industry that we are from, higher education sector. So what one of our attendees asked is, how do we use AI and the techniques or the AI marketing canvas for acquisition of the right student body, in our university?
Oh,
So this is for you.
really interesting question, Raj. I have some thoughts, but you want to start us off?
Jim, why don't you start?
Well, look, I mean, it all comes down to, as Dr. Larry advised us, like what problem are you trying to solve? What is the variable that if we were better able to predict it would give a better outcome, and what does better or what does success look like, right? So, is it more students? Is it a different kind of student? Is it a better completion rate at the end of the program? Like, what is it that you're trying to predict? And then, where can I gather data in the process? I know several global and U.S. for-profit universities have been down this path, trying to figure out, what message do I put in front of what prospective student on what website at what time in order to get a better interest rate, meaning better click-through rate on those ads, getting them to download some information or sign up to meet with an admissions officer, ultimately to get them to enroll and complete the program more successfully. So, I don't know, Raj, Larry, if you've thought further about this, but I think all the things we've talked about in the Canvas, there's no reason why a higher education institute couldn't follow that maturity curve as well.
Like picking where to go to school, I suppose a little bit like picking a date or something. I mean, it's a very personal choice in a lot of ways. And I think that I think it's a great problem, actually. Helping people find the right place for them is really a wonderful problem, and something that could really add a lot of value to, right now it's a pretty haphazard process that, I'm not familiar with how it happens in India, but in the United States, there's a sort of a set of rituals at different levels of the market about how to go through picking where you're going to go to school. But I think it could absolutely be helped a lot through technology. And this actually reminds me a little bit of the B2B, the issue that came up, that the customers already know what they want by the time they contact the salesperson. To me, that suggests that the way to move forward is to provide those customers with better tools to educate themselves about what they want, that's the way to actually kind of get them to want your product, because you're helping them figure out what they need and want. And I think that's the path for higher education as well. I think the right student is the student who understands that this is the right choice for them, actually.
Yeah. So I would add that I think I agree with all what was said, and I would add that the challenge in higher ed, which I've seen, is in the traditional higher ed model, where you have degree programs and admission cycles. It's almost as like the same challenge the politics field has. There is one cycle, and there is a lot of activity going towards that one cycle of admissions through which you want the results to come out. So if you're focused on moving analytics into admissions, you'll see a lot of resistance, because they're saying, well, there are so many different levels in the cycle. It's only one time, and there's capacity constraint. How do I measure the ROI? But if you shift that, and that's where placing where you use AI and analytics is important. But if you're looking at building the brand, building the website traffic, building the portfolio of things, that's where you see a lot of ROI, because you can see the measurement is on the website traffic and links and alumni engagement and donations and so forth. So the places, if you're thinking about broadly as an educational institution, I would place the best, the fastest returns would be on website, brand development, would be on donations and alumni engagement. And if you're running exec ed courses, short company courses, those are the places where you see FX. Degree programs, eventually it rolls into it, but it's a very different kind of enrollment system.
If I could add one more thing here. I mean, I think it's one question from the university or college's perspective, or the educational institution's perspective, how do they find the right student body? But there's a big equity question here as well, because there's so many fantastically talented young people, especially, but everybody at all ages, who could use opportunities very successfully to not only improve themselves, but make the world better. And we're probably not doing a very good job at identifying those people and giving them those opportunities right now. And I think that I think there's a great challenge there. Again, not thinking about the end of the marketing pipeline, but the beginning. How do you even reach out and identify those people where they didn't even know that this was a possibility for them?
Thank you, Dr. Larry. So with that, I would like to conclude the question and answers. We do have some very exciting questions also, which we can take up separately on email and send across. I see Dr. Mashelkar wants to share some thoughts. So over to you, Dr. Mashelkar.
Well, all that I wanted to do was say how fascinating the last 2 hours have been. I learned so much. So thank you, Jim, Larry, Sundar, Raj, for a fantastic session. I could see repeated reference to Geo Institute. And I can assure you, we will work for AI for all, not AI for just some. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.